Welcome, folks, to this special edition of the 700 Club. It was once the richest nation in South America, but today Venezuela stands on the brink of absolute disaster. Its people are starving, disease is spreading, and millions have fled that troubled nation.
Well, hyperinflation is ravaging the economy, and global officials warn it's about to get worse. Dale Hurd explains the cause behind this catastrophe and how it might be turned around.
Life for most people in Venezuela is already terrible, so it might be hard to believe it's about to get even worse. But experts say it is. 1,000,000%. That's the inflation rate the International Monetary Fund predicts Venezuela will hit this year. One of the world's leading experts on hyperinflation calls that prediction only a guess. But Steve Henke at the Johns Hopkins University and a former economic advisor to past Venezuelan President Rafael Caldera says the true inflation rate is bad enough.
The inflation rate is 25,650% today. The IMF is forecasting. I don't forecast, I measure it, because you can measure it, but you can't forecast the course or duration of a hyperinflation.
Most of the nation is starving. Society has broken down. Disease is spreading. Between 4 and 5 million Venezuelans have left the country since 1999, one of the biggest population moves in Latin American history. Even socialist President Nicolas Maduro admitted failure at a recent party congress where, for good measure, the power went out. Henke and Latin American policy analyst Juan Carlos Hidalgo both say Venezuela's problems go back even farther than Maduro's predecessor, socialist President Hugo Chavez.
Chavez was a consequence of the mismanagement of Venezuela's economy back in the 1980s and the 1990s. However, Chavez aggravated these problems. Maduro only came to increase the effect of these policies. He's a communist apparatchik. He was trained in Cuba, but he's only continuing the policies that began to be implemented with Hugo Chavez.
And the tragedy is that with so much oil wealth, Venezuela's future could have been so much brighter if it hadn't chosen socialism. But while it might look like there's no hope for Venezuela, Henke says the hyperinflation could stop today by adopting the dollar.
Dollarize the economy officially. It would stop within a few minutes, it would be over. The thing would turn around on a dime.
But it's not clear if President Maduro would ever allow Venezuela to adopt the dollar. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Oh, the latest thing is there's a subsidiary in America called Citgo. You've probably seen some of their stations. You've seen Citgo. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of Venezuela. And the courts are now saying there are lawsuits against you, and the creditors owe money, and they can take over Citgo. Of course, Venezuela's trying, because that's a big source of money. But you remember a few years ago, there was a really incorrect story. I mean, I said something on just a spur of the moment thing about they should assassinate Chavez. Oh, there was headlines all over the paper, aren't you a monster, and so forth. Well, the truth is, if they'd done that, they'd have been a whole lot better off. This Maduro is a former, what is he, a cab driver or something? He doesn't know anything about economics. And they had one of the biggest oil deposits in the world. And they had a thriving oil industry. Everything was wonderful. The economy in Venezuela was great, and then they have destroyed it. Folks, that is the legacy of socialism. Don't ever let somebody tell you socialism is good. We have candidates running for president who claim they are socialists. Do you want to be in the United States like Venezuela? Don't listen to them. They are telling lies. Well, in other news, Rudy Giuliani says Robert Mueller should respond to President Trump's legal team this week about terms for answering questions in the Russia probe. Ephraim Graham has more on our top stories from CBN News. Here's Ephraim.
Pat, pressure is growing for Special Counsel Robert Mueller to wrap his investigation into Russian collusion by September 1st. Our Amber Strong takes a look at the president's legal strategy and his team's call for a quick end to the Russia probe.
Over the weekend, the president taking aim once again at Attorney General Jeff Sessions over the ongoing Russia investigation. I have never seen anything so rigged in my life. Our AG is scared stiff and missing in action, the president tweeted from his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. Presidential advisor Kellyanne Conway says the president is frustrated with what he sees as a lopsided investigation.
The gravamen of his tweets, John, are that he wants to make sure we're investigating all sides of the quote, so-called Russian collusion.
Senator Lindsey Graham also backing the president and calling for an investigation into the investigation.
When it came to the Trump campaign, it was corrupt, it was biased, and I think unethical. Mr. Orr should not have had any role in investigating the Trump campaign because his wife worked at Fusion GPS.
Graham is citing a conflict of interest for Bruce Orr, a high-ranking Justice Department official who had connections to the research firm Fusion GPS that helped compile the dossier that helped lead to the Russia investigation. Meanwhile, Trump's legal team is putting pressure on the special counsel to wrap up his investigation before the midterms.
There is a Justice Department practice, and he's bound by it, that to the best you can, you shouldn't be carrying these things on right before an election.
Trump's attorney Rudy Giuliani also says the president did not instruct former FBI Director James Comey to take it easy on National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, an apparent about-face from his earlier remarks, something Giuliani denies.
So you're saying that President Trump and James Comey never discussed Michael Flynn?
That is what he will testify to if he's asked that question.
Now, that 2017 Comey conversation is an important factor into the special counsel's investigation as to whether or not the president obstructed justice. Regardless, Rudy Giuliani says President Trump won't be taking any questions when it comes to fired FBI Director James Comey. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
September 1st, fast approaching. Pat?
I want to say it again. Any counsel that would put his client into a situation with a vicious prosecutor and a biased prosecutorial team, they're setting him up for perjury. And nobody would put his client into a perjury trap. You just don't do that. And I don't know that Mueller has the power to require the president to answer questions. They've offered to answer written questions, but all they've got to do is say, well, Mr. Trump, what was in your mind when so-and-so went on, when you did this? What were you thinking? And he says, well, I wasn't thinking anything. Oh, well, and then they'll play back something where he says, well, I was thinking this, and then they'll say he's perjured himself. I mean, it'll be a terrible thing. That's the only way they can win in this thing. And it's so terrible that they talk about obstruction of justice. The president cannot obstruct justice by speaking to the members of his staff and telling them what to do. He has authority under the Constitution to do certain things. That's what a president does. We want the president to lead the country. And this witch hunt thing has got to stop. He should never, that man in the Justice Department should never have appointed a special prosecutor to begin with. It was suggested, I think the wise thing is that they should have had a special commission to study the question of whether there was Russian involvement in our election and then make recommendations, but not have an adversarial proceeding with a prosecutor bringing the charge. And the special prosecutor has got enough damage in his life, he shouldn't be allowed to do it. So I hope Rudy Giuliani and Jay Sekulow will stand firm on this one. And if they have to take it to the Supreme Court, by all means do it. But, the special prosecutor ought to back off. He's wasted enough money. And, the thing, for example, he has a mandate to investigate Russian collusion. So what is he doing bringing a tax case against Paul Manafort? Why is he bringing a case for bank fraud or tax fraud against a person that has nothing to do with that Russian probe? But he's doing it. So he's going afield already from the mandate he's been given. Okay, Efren, what else we got?
Pat, former presidential advisor Omarosa Manigault-Newman is under fire for secretly recording White House conversations. One of those included her firing by Chief of Staff John Kelly in the high-security Situation Room where cell phones and other recording devices are not allowed. Security experts denounced the recordings as, quote, a serious breach of ethics and security. Manigault-Newman said she viewed the conversation with Kelly as a threat and defended her decision to covertly record it. She also claims to have heard a tape of President Trump using a racist slur. Trump labeled Manigault-Newman a, quote, lowlife. Democrats say Republicans are rushing Judge Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearings for the U.S. Supreme Court. The hearings are set for September 4th, and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said he hopes to confirm Kavanaugh before the court starts its new session on the 1st of October. Democrats say they want more time to review documents from Kavanaugh's time in the George W. Bush administration. Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley said there will be time to study the documents, but it is first time for the American people to hear from Judge Kavanaugh. The Kavanaugh confirmation could have an impact on several midterm elections. In Missouri, where President Trump won with 56% of the vote in 2016, Democrat Senator Claire McCaskill faces a challenge from Attorney General Josh Hawley. As Abigail Robertson reports, the race is one of the most closely watched contests in the nation.
The Missouri Senate race is one of the toughest to win in 2018. And voters are focused on a major issue that could spell trouble for Democratic incumbent Senator Claire McCaskill, confirming Judge Brett Kavanaugh.
I think if she votes against the Trump nominee, I think it'll be enough that if the Republicans get organized and get back together, they can defeat her.
President Trump won Missouri by almost 20 points in 2016. Congresswoman Ann Wagner says many in her state supported Trump because of the president's potential impact on the court system.
It's huge. There are a lot of voters that I talked to, especially in my district during the last election. Some of them voted for Donald Trump, specifically because of the court, not just the Supreme Court, but what he would be able to do to impact the federal bench also.
McCaskill hasn't publicly announced her stance on Kavanaugh and plans to meet with him in August. While she voted against Justice Neil Gorsuch's confirmation, she tells CBN News she's voted in favor of 68% of the president's picks and tries to work with her Republican colleagues in Washington.
That's what people really want. They want us to quit yelling at each other, and they want us to start working together. And I've got a lot of proof points that that's exactly the kind of senator I've been, and I'm hopeful that that will be enough.
Her Republican opponent, Missouri Attorney General Josh Hawley, a former clerk for Chief Justice John Roberts, says he thinks the most important vote a senator casts is for a Supreme Court justice.
Senator McCaskill needs to be leading her party on this issue. She should be out there challenging Democrats to support Kavanaugh, and she should pledge to support him right now.
One priority facing Hawley is trying to repair and unite a state Republican Party that's struggled since the May resignation of Governor Eric Greitens over reports of affairs and misconduct. Hawley and McCaskill will face off in a series of debates before the November election. And both parties see this as a critical Senate seat to win in 2018. Reporting from St. Louis, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
A closely watched race indeed. Pat?
You know, Kavanaugh is such a superb candidate, and for several Democrats to elect Claire McCaskill to vote against him, it would set them up for clearly a challenge in the election. He should be confirmed overwhelmingly. He's a wonderful candidate. And yes, they are sort of rushing it along, but his record is out there. They can see what he is. He's a superb judge, and as was Neil Gorsuch, who was just absolutely fantastic. But when he's in, that means that the balance on the Supreme Court is coming more and more conservative. More, if you can use the term, to the intention of the framers of the Constitution, rather than the sliding scale of how to do it according to current trends of sociology. That is not the way our intention was. I mean, our Constitution was supposed to be. It's supposed to be a fixed document, and that's what Antonin Scalia emphasized. And I think Gorsuch and Roberts and Thomas and these other guys that are putting together the coalition with another conservative on, they will have a coalition that will be pretty tough. And then the next, Trump is going to have the opportunity of maybe naming one or two more on the court before he's finished. And that'll be, talking about a lasting legacy, setting up the Supreme Court, because they have a lifetime tenure, and he's putting in young men in their their 40s or actually early 50s, and they will be around for 20, 30 years. It's going to be a major, major win for him.